Being charged, I felt like nobody was listening, even when presented with the facts that my husband at the time abused me so many times. The prosecutors, they just wanted to convict me.
He assaulted me, but I was the one that went to jail. I felt horrible. I just felt like the system failed me.
I was shackled and thrown to the ground. I think that's one of the lowest points I've ever had to face in my life. Contacting my advocate gave me all the strength that I needed at that moment.
I've been working with survivors of domestic violence for over 20 years. Working at the YWCA, we see African American women who are victims of abuse being arrested more than any other race. And I knew that we could be doing more for our African American women and women of color. This project was put together for that very purpose. It was created with a partnership with the King County Prosecutor's Office.
A survivor-defendant is somebody who is a prior victim of domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking, who, as a result and a byproduct of those experiences, ends up being a defendant in the criminal justice system for any type of crime.
So once the cuffs goes on, life is never the same for a survivor. She may lose her housing, she may lose her job, she may lose her children. Most of all, she loses her dignity. Many survivors have never been to jail before. So this is a horrifying experience all the way around.
You know, having grown up in a home with domestic violence and knowing the impact that it had, Survivors First represents a lot of that personal experience. So many of the women who are involved in the criminal justice system have been prior victims. Yes, public defenders or judges or the women that you see in your practice, are they former victims of domestic violence and sexual assault? The typical response will be, oh yeah, all of them are. There's just not a lot of intervention.
We have mental health court, we have drug court, but we have no program for survivors that have been charged with DV crime. At the YWCA, we offer community resources, legal advocacy, rapid rehousing, all of the pieces to support a survivor who's trying to become self-sufficient.
Once survivors become defendants, there is a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of barriers. The emotions that I see, the major one is fear. You know, what's gonna happen if they're gonna go to jail? They're gonna lose everything. Depression, being disillusioned. When I call for help, I didn't get help. Black women are not perceived as victims because of how they present through trauma. They're perceived as strong, but it does not mean that they are not a victim.
I was born in Guyana. My husband brought me here. He was very, very abusive, emotionally, verbally, physically. I had no status at the time, and he would always use my status against me. If I do something that he didn't like or I didn't listen to him, he would call the cops. And because of my status, I felt if I talked to a cop, it's gonna get me in trouble, so I never said anything. In this case, he claimed I hit him and I hit the kids. Obviously, the charges were dropped. And when I was walking out, that's when an immigration officer met me and he arrested me again. I was left trying to rebuild my life, and here was Bridget. She saw what I was going through. She understood what was happening in my life. She was able to explain certain things that I couldn't understand.
I understand how the process worked with the protection orders, how to help them navigate the different departments. Personally, I've experienced, domestic violence myself. I was sitting in a corner, in a fetal position, my knees up, and I was crying, and the thought went through my head, I wouldn't want any other woman to feel what I'm experiencing right now.
I didn't have many people in my life.
She had 0 people to go to. I was it for her.
I learned a lot about domestic violence. I didn't see it as that. I grew up seeing my mom go through that. So had it not been for Survivors First, I wouldn't have been able to understand what I was going through and the effect it had on me.
She is now. I saw her a couple of days ago and she was smiling. She came out and she was smiling and she was happy and she was light. That's what makes it so rewarding doing this work.
What makes Survivors First unique is that we are working hand in hand with the prosecuting attorney's office. Prosecutors often look at an event, right? And they're like, okay, I'm just looking at this one incident. Survivors First really opens up the lens to say, no, we need to be looking at this whole survivor. I see a wide range of emotions when working with survivor defendants. One of the biggest ones is institutional betrayal.
I was 7 years into an abusive relationship. There was all kind of altercations continuously going on where the police were involved. Being arrested was demeaning. My clothes were stripped from me. I was shackled and thrown to the ground. Coming out of an abusive relationship and being in that type of a situation, it was traumatic.
I imagine the law enforcement wants to get it right, but the fact that they do not get consistent yearly training on domestic violence, it makes it impossible for them to be able to get it right.
I was in the bad spot with my children's dad. He assaulted me, but I was the one that went to jail because I damaged his property.
Okay, there was property damage, yes, but what led to the property damage? The police didn't take the time to find out what had occurred and instead just immediately arrested her.
I was actually a victim that was defending herself. I felt violated. I felt like I didn't have no rights. There's probably good police officers, but because of my experience with them, I'm very cautious.
Gender-based violence and domestic violence is not really intuitive. And so their power is being used in ways that is undermining their authority. Because now you have folks like my client who doesn't trust police, who has PTSD reactions when they see police. That's a breakdown of the system right there.
When you're a prosecutor, we can only operate on cases. We're a reflection of society. Society is, in many respects, broken on issues of race and issues of equity. And so we're broken too. And you look at a program like Survivors First, it's trying to help repair that break.
How can you help? As a prosecutor, you have the power to make the choices. As law enforcement, slow down. Talk to both parties, get the full story. As community partner, check with your local district attorney's office. See if there's a way that you can create that partnership. It can be done. We did it. We've served over 142 women just this year.
Not everybody has a support system. To be covered with so many great women who are rooting for me gave me all the strength that I needed.
As advocates, we work to help reintroduce you to you. Who were you before this abuser took that from you?
Survivors First has really helped me and made me feel like I can say whatever it is that I need to say and still feel safe and don't have to worry about my words being used against me.
Had it not been for this program, I just wouldn't have been here. There's so much they teach you about yourself and what you're dealing with. It's just impossible to not have this program.
This program absolutely works. And it is worth prosecutors making a decision to take a deeper look. It's worth police officers taking the time to assess when they go out to a call. It's life and death to a survivor.
A lot of governmental officers don't think about how they can partner with a community organization.
In the larger framework of racial justice, Survivors First, it's actually doing something. And I think that's how change happens. Change happens person to person. And eventually, some people become champions.
My guys always say, don't talk about it, be about it. Put it in action, because it can make a difference.
If you're serving survivors and seeking justice, you should be serving survivors who are at greatest risk and greatest need. And Survivors First gives us a chance to advance that.
Working with Survivors First made me feel like I don't feel helpless. I am powerful.
Through Survivors First, we can end the cycle of criminalizing survivors of domestic violence. A little bit of care goes a long way.